Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a virtual studio visit with Preston Singletary. I'm Mary Savig, the Lloyd Herman Curator of Craft at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's Renwick Gallery. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Native communities who make their home here in Washington, D.C., the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands we are gathered, and the labor of the people who were enslaved in constructing the historic buildings of the American Art Museum and Renwick Gallery. At any point during our program tonight, please use the Q&A box to ask any questions. We will share key information with you throughout the program via the chat box. We also ask that you not close your browser window, as a survey will appear after the program, and we appreciate your feedback about the program today. This program is being recorded and will be available on our website. It is also being live captioned, which you can access with the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. The Smithsonian American Art Museum and Renwick Gallery is a nonprofit organization that relies on private donations. We're able to share free digital programs like this one today, thanks to funding from generous supporters like you. Please consider showing your support with a donation today. A link to donate on our website was just posted in the chat box. Thank you first to Preston and everyone whose behind the scenes work made this program possible, especially SAAM's program team of Gloria Kenyon, Chantal Jones-Williams, Jess McFadden, Alicia Tamarchenko, and tonight's closed captioner, Farrell Kopicki, who have all helped this program run smoothly. Preston Singletary is a Tlingit glass artist based in Seattle, Washington. The artist began his training with Pacific Northwest luminaries, and then in the 1980s began carving a distinct path in both American studio glass and contemporary indigenous art with his profound representations and reclamations of Tlingit culture. Preston skillfully wields the properties of glass to carry the cultural knowledge of Tlingit people, including stories, symbols, and memories. Preston's work, Safe Journey, behind me tonight, is currently on view in the Renwick Gallery's 50th anniversary exhibition, This Present Moment, which will be open through April 2nd, 2023. And his immersive exhibition, Raven in the Box of Daylight, is at the National Museum of the American Indian through January 2023. Tonight, we're going to hear more about Preston's life and career, and then tour his studio, gaining insight into his artistic practice. So now I'm pleased to turn it over to Preston, who will begin the program with a brief introduction to his body of work. Welcome, Preston.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and do this virtual presentation. I'm going to share my screen real quick here, and we'll get started. A presentation to begin with, and then we'll do the studio tour. So I grew up in Seattle. I am Tlingit, which is from Southeast Alaska, but my great-grandmother here, she moved from Sitka, Alaska, to Seattle in the 20s after she was widowed. She brought up the entire family with her, 4 children to begin with, and then she remarried a Filipino man and had more children, and so and lived to be 100 years old and died in 1980. Also in 1980, May 18th, 1980 was the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and this is what I always kind of jokingly refer to as what fostered my glass career, because some of the artists took the ash from the volcano and melted it. The basis of glass is silica, so they melted the ash and blew glass out of it. That factory grew rather quickly, and I got swept up in it through the introduction of Dante Marioni. But this is many years later, 1993, I met my wife, Åsa Sandlund. She was from Sweden. And we met on a work trip, and so we've been married since 1995. So in the, growing up in Seattle, after a couple of years in the factory, I ended up going to the Pilchuck Glass School and also working in the studio of Benjamin Moore, the man here in the center. And he was a student of Dale Chihuly's, and so he was kind of Chihuly's right-hand man for many years, and helped him develop his work. And so inadvertently, or in a roundabout way, I used to work with Dale a little bit through Benjamin's studio. So this is the main team that we worked with for over, about 20 years, 25 years, lost count. It's started in 1982, so it's coming up on my 40th anniversary of making glass. This is some of the earliest work that I did, which was representative of the cultural style in form and design. So I spent many years figuring out how to transfer these designs onto the glass in various ways. And so there's obviously like a totem pole and a bowl. And so I was exploring many different traditional forms that you would typically find carved out of wood, or, practicing the design work or learning how to create my own unique designs, using the design system of the Tlingit. So that's what really makes it recognizable as Tlingit design. These elements that you see, U forms and ovoids and these eyes, and all of these forms are inspired by traditional objects. This is a soul catcher. So this is based on a shaman's amulet, which to me speaks to the spirituality of the tribe. So working with these amulet forms was a way for me to kind of dance around the intellectual property issues with Tlingit art, because a lot of this work refers back to certain families and designs that are traditionally called crest symbols. Are you tend to stay away from those kinds of designs. But once you understand the architecture of the design style, you're free to create infinite varieties of designs. So these are, as my skills evolved and my imagination kind of started to develop around, interpreting these designs, I started to, create a lot of variety. And, monumental scale, these are quite, they're about the house posts on either side of this screen are about 6.5 feet tall, and they weigh about 600 pounds. It's for me, it's really, it's kind of every day is like an adventure going to work, because I'm working with these things, and it's quite fulfilling to have this sense of purpose with what I do, because glass is not a traditional medium. It is something that we're starting to work with. I mean, the studio glass movement is really just over 50 years old. So the fact is that Native people didn't really have access to hot glass, but so this group of objects are sort of moving into what I call kind of a modernist style. I allow those kinds of influences to come into my work. It's kind of inspired by, the modernists and the primitivism genre and surrealism, and so I like to kind of turn the tables on the modernists, so to speak, whereas they were freely inspired by African art, oceanic art, Native American art. And I like to take inspiration from their work and think about what it is that their thought process behind being inspired by so-called primitive art. So part of what I do is try to reimagine, different amulet forms. So that, to me, this is almost like a shaman's amulet, like, which is a small bone fetish, but it is reinterpreted as a sculptural object, and playing with a little bit of pictorial type of style. This was in the summer of 2001, and we made a totem pole for the Pilchuck Glass School, and it was to kind of illuminate the founders of the school, John Halberg, Dale Chihuly, and Annie Halberg. For this was sort of a rite of passage for me. To have Tlingit carvers on the campus was quite an amazing experience for me, quite profound. Had this sense of deja vu while I was there, which was really significant for me, kind of signifying that I was in the right place, doing the work that I should be doing in my life. Again, more play on modernism, and I like to show lots of images here, so you get a real variety, or a sense of the variety that I work with. Most of these are blown forms, but this last one, this is a lost wax casting. This is made from a wood carving, and then it's transformed into glass. Again, working with these figurative things, all these little figures are sculpted individually and then brought together in one blowing session, and creating the canoe form and then sticking them all together. So yeah, as my skills evolve, and the pieces can change in their sculptural form, and always, playing with new ideas, a lot of research and development. And this is the Safe Journey box that was at the Renwick Gallery. It was like acquisition from last year, and this represents my the passing of my grandmother, or I'm sorry, my father, who passed away, and the two lights represent both my grandfather and my father, who they were very close, and so I put them in the idea of putting them in the box together. These are very recent pieces. Landowner form here. This was Genetic Memories, I called this piece. Raven's Eye. This was a piece for the Seattle Art Museum. Currently at the National Museum of the American Indian was this exhibition, which is kind of an interactive installation, which is animated by video, and it tells the story of Raven in the Box of Daylight. It talks about how Raven brought daylight to the world, and it's quite an involved story, but it's one of the most well-known mythologies in Alaska. And just some little details from the exhibition to give you a sense of what I did, working multimedia, and there's sound, there's music. And so this is essentially, it culminates with this last gallery, or last room in the gallery, that talks about the origin of the clans and the adoption of animal symbols to represent the families. This Maori proverb, which my accomplishments are not my own, but those of many, which really kind of talks about the ancestral lineage from the ancients that developed this artwork. And I'm really, I'm doing it today in my own way, and hopefully bringing another dimension to Tlingit art, indigenous art, but also the fact that this is my team. Some of these folks have been helping me for up to 17 years today. And so this is David Svensson. He is one of my first mentors. Carved actually the totem pole at Pilchuck. This was a piece that I worked with him collaboratively on because I don't carve wood, but I wanted to make a totem pole out of glass. And so this was my first one that I made. It's about 2,000 pounds of glass. And this is the second one that's currently in production. And it's a killer whale totem. It's a little bigger. It's about 2,800 pounds. These are all lost wax castings. This represents my family and my wife coming from Sweden. So you can see Odin in the center there with two ravens on either side of him, or one on either side. A little bit about public art. These are some pieces that I've accomplished with a fellow who I work collaboratively with named David Franklin. This was a collaboration with some slalom carvers, some local native folks here in the Salish region. And this was the most recent one that we've done. So we've been applying for public art jobs, and finally, over time, we've been getting them. So this was La Diab fish. It was octopus, which just coincided with the mascot of the new hockey team we just got, playing at the Climate Pledge Arena. A little bit about Indigenous artist gatherings. These are times when I've been able to travel to New Zealand, Hawaii, and also North America, working with Indigenous artists from all around. So here we're in New Zealand, and this is my best attempt at looking at like a Maori warrior. The Maori are really incredible people. They're just very, very educated and progressive. They are very unified in their culture, and it's really inspiring to see how much momentum they have. Collaborations. I do a lot of working with other artists. They come from all parts of the country, but a lot in the Southwest here because I travel to Santa Fe quite a bit. Harlan Riano is Santo Domingo Pueblo. Each time I work with an artist, it becomes a real challenge to sort of interpret their ideas. So that's part of why I like working with other artists, and then traveling and meeting folks. This is obviously Australian Aboriginal people who we formed we made an agreement to do some work together and came up to my studio, and I made glass for them, and we helped them. So each time they take the lead in the form as well as the designs. These are some of the pieces that we've done. Joe David is one of my most important mentors. Not enough time to talk about everything here, but he really kind of validated me in a lot of ways, and gave me guidance and helped me learn more about the culture as well as native spirituality. This is Lewis Gardner. These are jade and glass combinations. So we took similar stories and kind of brought them together in a work of art. Get to work with people like this. Marcus Ammerman's Choctaw. And then Raven Sky River is another Tlingit artist. And he's really great at making these naturalistic sculptural forms. And Lisa Telford. I moonlight as a musician. These are a series of albums that I put together, collaborated with several different musicians. One of which was Bernie Worrell, who was the keyboard player for Parliament Funkadelic. And we spent 3 years working together on music. And I can talk as long about the music as I can about the art. This is sort of part of my artistic expression. but we took, I worked with my tribal members, Clarissa Rizal, Jean Tagaban here, and we reinterpreted cultural songs, folks, or our traditional clan songs, and created sort of a jazz rock and sort of funk slash rap style around the cultural music. And so we have a lot of fun. It's about a 10-piece band, and it's kind of like a 3-ring circus when we perform. It's quite dynamic and a lot of fun. And, you know, still working on getting recognized as a musician, but, you know, you think about the Buena Vista Social Club, you know, I'll probably be like 75 and hitting the road, getting on tour with my band, hopefully. So anyway, not quite a rock star, but we have the photos to make it look like it. And unfortunately, we lost Clarissa in 2016, and we lost Bernie as well. So that was very devastating, but we've kind of picked ourselves up, and we're working with new musicians today. So that's what I have for you today. As far as the visual presentation, I just wanted to give you some context about you know, the kind of the evolution of what I've come to do. So I'm going to stop sharing screen here. And I think we're back to regularly scheduled program here.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful presentation. I think a few people pointed out just how in awe they are of the diversity and scope of your work. And there were a couple questions about technique, so I think we'll get into that when we walk into your studio.
Yeah, so I'll take you on a real quick trip here through. Let me just turn the camera around. How do we do this? Okay. All right. So this is my studio. I'm up in the mezzanine here, and this is I'll pull back from this a little bit. This is a kind of a maquette for public art options, creating these big murals on panes of glass. It's laminated in between the two sheets of glass. And I'm going to take you downstairs and kind of show you the main work area as I pan past some interesting objects here, pieces that I've collected from various friends. These are my inspiration.
Are a lot of these contemporary?
Yeah, most of them are contemporary. I think the oldest one I have might be from the 70s. This is a interesting one. It was carved by Joe David. That's my mother's hair on there, and she had dreadlocks. So coming onto the main floor here, I'm just going to bomb through and just show you the glass studio, which nothing is really happening there at the moment, but you can see where I do all of the work. This is here's the furnace. So we usually shut off the studio in the like May, June. It doesn't get too hot here, but it can be kind of uncomfortable when it gets really warm. This is my tool wall here.
Can you describe, so the furnace is for your glass blowing practice?
Correct. Yeah. The furnace is this is the one that actually contains the glass in here. And you gather the glass out with pipes and rods. And then this is a reheating station, which is turned on at the start of the day and turned off at the end of the day. And there are doors here that are being repaired. So it actually, as the piece expands in its volume, then you can open more doors.
For people watching, this looks much different when it's on because it's a huge it looks like a huge ball of fire. And how hot does it get when
Well,
you
it's about 2,100 degrees. And these are some molds that I use to create masks for some of those figures that you saw. And so this is the kiln. You know, once you make a piece of glass, you have to kind of stabilize it to around 1,000 degrees is where the glass stops moving, and then you put it away and you cool it slowly over time to reduce the stress that is in the glass. It's going from a liquid to a solid. And these are all the colors that I use, and they're applied in different ways. You've got powders, glass powders, and these rods of glass, which correspond to, you know, basically creating layers of color that you're able to carve through. And there's a couple of these cast glass lost wax totem forms. So these are not that heavy. They're about 125 pounds, but that's what I call meditations with fire.
Mhm. And where do the original wooden totems come from? Where do you source them?
Well, I work collaboratively with carvers, and this was a form that was carved by David Svensson. This is the first large-scale totem that we
Mhm.
did. It's a story of my great grandmother who had a pet grizzly bear as a child. So there's the grizzly bear cub, and then that's represents my great grandmother. It's kind of a canoe form that was a maquette for the museum show.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll show you like my workstation here. Let's see. So these pieces are, yeah, this is a rubber tape that is applied to the surface, and then I draw
But just so everyone
directly.
knows, this is a blown glass work. So this was
Yeah.
made, yeah, there's a bubble
So yeah, you can see the green is this rubber tape, and that is just protects the glass. And then what I'll do is I'll cut along these lines and reveal areas that are going to be carved. Um, and this is another humpback whale that is a collaboration with Raven Sky River. So these will be picked back up, and then we'll stick these fins and tail flukes on to this form. So I've just started working on this, and here you can see I draw directly onto the rubber tape, and then I did manage to stage one here for you to show. So you can see that this was all covered by the green tape at one point, and so now what I've done is created the design around here, and obviously this is a salmon. You know, it's got the salmon eggs back here. So all of these areas that are yellow are going to be carved away to expose an inner color, which is usually transparent. And so you get the contrast in the work, you know, from the opal colors to the transparent colors, and it'll stand up more or less like this.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's kind of you know, that it's a symmetrical design. So I transferred one, you know, the entire form to the other side, and then it'll just be a freestanding sculpture. And so yeah,
So those ones are blown glass that are then sandblasted and carved. For the totems, people have a lot of questions about the mold. Those are usually those can be kiln cast, and then some of them are also carved and sandblasted.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
You walk through, yeah.
most of the sculptural forms are it's a lost wax process, and so it's a series of molds that are made around the form, and then you can create a wax positive. It's very much, akin to bronze casting, and I'll pull one of these over here. This one, this one's only about 45 pounds, I guess, but this is I call this the wood carver's totem. And so you have you've got a woodpecker up here, and you've got a human carver here. And there's little sapsuckers in the ears of this. Got the beaver here. And so in any case, it involves, making the wax. Then you cast plaster around the wax, and then you melt the wax out, and you have a negative space. And then you fill it with glass and melt it into the plaster form, the plaster mold, and then you break the mold away. And then there's a lot of hand working on the surface of, there's maybe small little areas where the glass was leaking through the plaster, so it might create like a little razor blade thin line. So there's a lot of unifying the surface and grinding and polishing involved with that. So that's how those are made. It's not a technique that I do. I mostly like hand manipulate the glass and create the sculptural form with my tools in my hand, and then I kind of imagine what's it gonna how am I going to integrate the design onto it. Sometimes I'll respond to the form, sometimes I'll have a very deliberate form in mind.
Yeah, I have a question about that. I have had the privilege of seeing you sculpt and blow glass in a studio in Seattle, and it is a lot like watching a ballet because you are also synchronized. And
Yes.
I'm also curious about how you choose your sources and what research you're doing before you start it, and then do you come up with a sketch that you bring into the studio? What's the process?
It goes in lots of directions. I mean, when I'm thinking about these forms, I have, obviously these are going to become basket designs here. Got, the beginnings of the design work here, and then it's going to be blasted with, many layers or strands of vinyl tape to create a the texture of the basket weaving. And then so these, this form here is kind of inspired by a bear's tooth.
Mhm.
And then there's one back here that's inspired by a bear's claw. And then you have, a variety of different traditional mask forms. And so, generally I know I might do a little thumbnail sketch, and then there's a lot of trial and error involved with what I'm going to be working on, or what the elements are going to be. Or sometimes I'll want to do something which resembles something very similar to a grease dish, for instance. So something like that, or a rattle form. So here you've got a couple of
Mhm.
um, these humpbacks, and these are quite small in comparison to some of the larger ones we've done. So you can see, You've got the the tail flukes here. So it's kind of very naturalistic
Mhm.
looking. And then I've put the some little elements to give it, a little bit of design work.
They're beautiful. There is a question about color that I was also curious about, and also related to color, I think in glass is also the properties of light. How have you thought about light in your work? It seems like it has changed over your career.
Well, color, when you're working with color, sometimes I like to, I was very conservative in the beginning with color. I was using a lot of earth tones and uh, things like that, but and then I asked myself, well, why am I limiting myself? So I started using these bright blues and these new colors here. I think that the work interacts quite nicely with light all naturally.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of there's a ancestor somewhere. I'll show you some of the work up here
For
on
the
the
early
second
works,
floor.
I think another dimension of them is really the shadows that they cast too. It almost becomes
Right.
a really profound part of the sculpture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sort of became like the aha moment for me, working with the shadow effect. I don't have any of those pieces currently, but yeah, it was something that um, kind of I like to think of as like the petroglyph in Chaco Canyon where there was illuminated on the solstice kind of thing. Um, and so that was something that I really had a lot of fun with, and I thought it was a the idea that there was just a hidden spirit within the piece,
Mhm.
and the way it's illuminated. See, my feelings about glass in general is that it has this luminous quality that is unlike any other material, and so it's something that I think is very special. And the fact is that the you know uh, the glass is both strong and fragile at the same time.
Mhm.
It has a the potential for it to last centuries,
Mhm.
and it can be lost in a heartbeat, if it's broken. So,
Can we go
uh,
back to look at your tools?
mm, oh,
We're
that's
getting some tool questions. I
okay.
love the works that you just
That's,
showed though, because they have that really nice matte finish that almost is trying to absorb the light.
mm-hmm.
And then the
Yeah, we
work
have.
that we have, and also some of the works that are in the American Indian show right now, have lights inside of them that
Mm-hmm,
project outward, and the ones that are in our box, also the Renwick's box, also shimmer. They're actually
mm-hmm.
moving.
Yeah. That was. I mean, I really like sort of animating the the um, the pieces, and doing the Raven show at NMAI was also a really special. I mean, it was a thought process that I had to get into, and I did it collaboratively with theatrical a guy who's an artist in his own right, but he works with the dance troupe.
Mhm.
So Juniper Shui, and so he
Okay.
helped me with all of the video work. So we had a question about tools.
Yeah,
Here's some
someone asked
tools.
what tool is used to carve the design out, and I think this is the answer. All of these tools are used for sculpting hot glass. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
how that works? I know it's harder to talk about than show.
yeah. Well, this has not this is really just the shaping of the glass. These are tools that you use to sort of constrict the form and make it narrower, giving you the opportunity to break it away from the pipe. These are, pinchers, little tweezers that you can grab, the bits of glass, or I guess these are kind of like the most recent kind of development tools. So these allow you to reach up inside and push an area out and just make it protrude, and then you can kind of push it back with, sort of knives, and you can cut, and then smooth out with like these kinds of forms. So these give me the ability to, push a big section of the bubble in, or, inflate it from, once you break it away from the blowpipe, it allows you, that'll give you the opportunity to inflate it once again. And then I have these torches here, which are also very, very specific in heating, sort of spot heating.
So when you, so those tools are used when you are moving it to and from the furnace to keep it hot and molten. And then when it's cold, then you apply the sticky tape and you cut. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about how to sandblast?
So the sandblasting is pressurized. It's aluminum oxide. So I have a compressor and a booth that you place the form inside, and then you sort of simply wear the surface of the exposed areas. You wear that surface down, carving through that layer of color, and that's how you're able to cut into the color itself. So when you see all the pieces that I've done more or less like this, you can see more or less how far I had to carve through. This actually is unique because it has three colors, but you can see it's pretty layered right on top of each other. And so I'm sort of trying to get that tertiary color out in this particular form. A lot of the work that I do is really just positive, negative, like this. So you've got the exterior, and then the interior is a transparent color. So I was going to go up here just to show you some more finished work and more different kinds of work.
Can you talk a little bit about carving? That's a separate process than sandblasting, or are you carving with the sandblaster?
We are carving with the sandblaster.
Okay.
Yeah. I call it sand carving. It's related to wood carving. So here you can see these are the basket forms, and these are like layers of slitted vinyl tape that are laid on the piece and then blasted at different stages to create that sort of fake weave texture. Few of these are
something that you had to figure out through many trial and errors.
Yeah, I mean, just through the development of the work, I started to experiment with that technique to get the weave pattern.
So with the figures on the exterior of that one, those were sculpted separately. Were they added when everything was still hot?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is a matter of getting it hot enough so that you can melt it into the surface. And so these are forms that they're all preformed, and then I bring it back up to temperature to about 1,000 degrees, or probably 1050 or something, and then I pick it up out of the kiln. It's kind of risky, but it's about the temperature that it will not fracture and break, and so then I can incorporate it into a another form. This is a little octopus sculpture here.
That's beautiful opalescent glass that you had in the one with the applied forms.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was actually just a special color that is reacts with the gas flame. So it's a lot of lead and silver and gold in it. This was
So,
actually
oh
let me
wow,
point this
yeah.
out. So
So,
that kind of mimics the abalone in the
mhm,
work. So that's a
that's beautiful.
dichroic glass, which kind of catches the light in a real special way.
So glass blowing especially is very collaborative. Someone is
Hmm.
wondering if you are involved with the making of every piece and what the division of labor is.
Yeah, I do all the glass blowing. I do all most of the shaping. I work with people who are really good at
Oh, you might want to go back in. I think your Wi-Fi is not as great outside.
I of those. Okay.
There we go. Now it's better.
Um.
Yeah, I mean, you
Anyways,
all work so
so
well together.
I
Yeah.
have, I have 4 employees, and I have um, glass blowers that I employ, on uh, a daily basis, depending on. I mean, I can make several pieces in a day, so I don't have to work every day. I mean, because I need to do the drawing and the design work.
Mhm.
And so when I pass, then I pass it after I draw it. I usually pass it off to another of my studio assistants, and she'll cut the design out, and then I pass it. Then it goes to the third person, and she does the sandblasting. So at one point, I used to do every step of it myself. I did absolutely every aspect of it. And then I started training people to help me with the process, and it allowed me to be a lot more prolific.
Mhm. And related to that, I really am interested in your collaborations with other artists. A lot
Mhm.
of them, you have the necessary skill in glass to be able to make the forms, and they're bringing their visual language to the form, and they really rely on you to be able to create that in glass because they're not. Most of them look like they were maybe mostly ceramists or working with clay.
Yeah.
Have
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
have you tried working with clay or wood carving, or have you gone worked with other
Um,
mediums?
I mean, I've tried wood carving a little bit, but then I realized that it'd take me a whole lifetime to get really good
Mhm,
at it. You know, and so I have folks that do the carving for me with the understanding that I'm gonna translate it into the material of glass, and so I call them my ghost carvers.
mhm,
And I'm completely transparent about it. I just realized that at one point that you know this is a way for me to work, um, to branch out and create more work in different ways. So pushing into other mediums like bronze, steel, um, as well as
mhm,
the casting of the glass, which I don't do myself either. Um, yeah, and in the glass field, I mean, it's more like the European tradition. You understand the material, you design within the confines of the material, and you have it done. But I mean, it's the American attitude is like, oh well, he didn't make that piece. Dale Chihuly didn't blow the piece himself. It really doesn't matter. It's like he's the one that had the vision. He's the one that forged the path. He's the one that he was a real hotshot glass blower before he put his eye out. So the guy's 80-year-old man who who his depth perception wasn't the same after he. So it was really hard for him to do it, but he was so good at the rest of it and conceptualizing and bringing people together. And so when I work collaboratively with other artists, that is also an exciting thing for me because I'm sort of bringing people into the field. I
Mhm.
mean, I've spent 25 years working for other artists, and I
Mhm.
never required that my name be on that piece, you know.
Mhm.
So the structure of the team, when you hire the glass blowers, they help you, but it's your piece,
Yeah.
and that's how it works. The and so artists who want to work with glass, when they hire glass makers to do it, it's perfectly acceptable. I mean, that's the way that we look at it. And they're designers rather than the makers, yes, but they have the vision, they put their name on it, and that's their piece.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and it also reminds me of an apprenticeship model too. Glass blowing does take years and years and years to gain skill in. So you do
Yeah.
often need to study under another artist who has those skills and can teach them to you before.
Hmm.
I mean, it helps a lot of artists find their own voice in that process when they are helping somebody else out.
Yeah. And I think, it was interesting too, because I don't teach very often. I did teach this past, I just came from Pilchuck School. Um, but by working collaboratively with other people, I'm showing what can be done on the level that I can produce glass, which is, a pretty high level. And so I'm showing the example of what can be. And so hopefully, I always, think of myself as an ambassador of the glass world to the indigenous cultures.
Mhm.
And that's kind of fun. I mean, I've gained a lot of notoriety
Mhm.
from it, and so it's something that yeah, I take it as I mean, it's sort of like sharing cultural knowledge. It's
Yeah.
in the same way. Um, it becomes like a responsibility to some degree. And so by working with other artists, I really enjoy that because then I also learn
Mhm.
how do they interpret their own culture for contemporary society. I know that in Alaska, in the Tlingit culture, there's so much question of intellectual property, based on stories and symbols and designs and what have you. Um, so I think that when and a lot of indigenous cultures have that. They call it their family patterns. In
Mhm.
Australia, they call it, this is our family pattern. This is our pattern laws. This is our song laws.
Mhm.
That's what they call them, laws. Um, but most people do have those symbols that represent the lineage where you come from, and then often details are eliminated, so you're not giving away this cultural form, so to speak, and it's that's I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and one thing I've heard you mention in the past is also how you feel like you're representing Tlingit culture and also reclaiming it in a lot of ways through this very contemporary medium. Could you talk a little bit more about what the reclamation looks like and what it's from maybe anthropological museum,
Yeah,
like?
yeah. I mean, when I first started doing glass and trying to do Tlingit style designs, a lot of people felt like it was too modern or too, something new. There was something they weren't very familiar with. And the thing is, that the anthropological point of view, I feel, is, putting people in this corral, like, this is this cultural corral, like you people never did this before, so whatever you're doing now, it doesn't really relate because it wasn't the way things were done, the way
Always in the
things were
past.
done. Yeah,
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
past. And so, part of, well, working with Joe David, we started to collaborate, and we had this exhibition in about 2004 called Fusing Traditions. And it was an overview at the time of all the different Native people working in glass. And Joe David made a really good point. He said, the materials that we use for the cultural art are becoming increasingly rare, like, the big cedar, trees for a totem pole or a dugout canoe. So you will start to see other materials being used
Mhm.
to keep the symbols and the stories alive. So by doing it in glass, I feel like I'm sort of, being iconoclastic and being, and showing that, potentially the more I do, the longer I work in glass and do this cultural art, the more of a tradition it will become,
Mhm.
and hopefully be an example of, the next generation to do something in their own way. Something, maybe it'll be, I don't know, concrete or steel or who knows what it's going to be. So, um,
Maybe recycling plastic. We need to do that.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, there's so
Yeah,
many opportunities.
your work does. I think because it is so luminous, it does often stop people in their tracks, especially in museums. It does have a quality that is very mesmerizing. So I just wanted to ask a question about from a viewer who is a docent at the MFA Boston, where she often talks about your work there, Raven Steals the Moon. And
Yeah.
she's just wondering if you have any particular um, message or story you would like to be conveyed about that work, and or just a general message, that maybe a bigger picture message that you would like people to take away from your work when they see it.
Yeah, that particular piece, falls into that Raven in the Box of Daylight story. It, in a lot of ways, that has a lot to do with um, Tlingit cosmology, and the fact that indigenous people knew a lot about their world pre-contact, and so these stories are passed down. I'm really interested in mythology. I'm interested in, Joseph Campbell's perspective of comparative mythology. And the fact that these stories are still exist. They tried to disallow the Tlingit, well, all Native people to um, disallow them to practice their culture and make their objects, and yet we are still here, and we are finding new ways of sharing our culture. And I hope that, I know that I have an opportunity as a glass artist, that people are going to look at it and have questions and wonder what this is all about. And so I think that is a great, art should instill a sense of wonder, and art should ask, should be able to elicit a reaction, and the viewer might have a lot of questions. So hopefully that they see my work, they're going to question, where does it come from? They might learn more about the culture. They might take an interest in it, and do some more research, because it's so fascinating. There's so much, so many different facets of that you can take when you're, as in anything, the more you know about it, the more interesting it becomes.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to wrap it up. I really wanted to thank you for illuminating these stories, and
Hmm.
I think you did spark a lot of questions. So I think this is just the beginning for hopefully a lot of people for learning more about Tlingit culture, and also your really impressive body of work. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
just read a little bit about how to take the survey. And just again, I wanted to thank you all for joining us for Preston Studio Tour. We would greatly appreciate your feedback about the program today. And please, if you're in Washington, D.C., please visit Preston's box in this present moment that will be on view through April 2nd, 2024. And a reminder that our museum is a nonprofit organization that relies on private donations, and we're able to share these programs Thanks to funding from supporters like you. Please consider showing your support with a donation today using the link we shared in the chat box. Good night, everyone, and thank you so much.
Night.